hay. More than ever was it necessary that he should be afield, for this exploit showed that some of the Sioux, at least, had cut loose from the main body and had circled back toward the Platte, Stabber's people in all probability. So, sending Crabb and his little squad across the river to follow a few miles at least the trail of the wagon and its captors, and ascertain, if possible, whither it had gone, he hurried back to Frayne; sent messengers by the Laramie road to speed the cavalry, and orders to the colonel to send 2 troops at once to rescue Hay and his niece; sent wires calling for a few reinforcements, and was off on the way to Beecher, guarded by a handful of sturdy doughboys in ambulances, before ever the body of the second victim was found. And then, little by little, it transpired that this mysterious war party, venturing to the south bank of the Platte, did not exceed half a dozen braves. Crabb got back in 36 hours with 5 exhausted men. They had followed the wheel tracks over the open prairie and into the foothills far to the northwest, emboldened by the evidence of there being but few ponies in the original bandit escort. But by 4 in the afternoon they got among the breaks and ravines, and first thing they knew, among the Indians, for zip came the bullets and down went 2 horses, and they had to dismount and fight to stand off possible swarms. And though owning they had seen no Indians, they had proof of having felt them, and were warranted in pushing no further. After dark they began their slow retreat, and here they were. And for 7 days that was the last heard, by the garrison at least, of these most recent captives of the Sioux. Gentle and sympathetic women, however, who called on Mrs. Hay, were prompt to note that though unnerved, unstrung, distressed, she declared again and again her faith that the Indians would never really harm her husband. They might hold him and Nanette as hostages for ransom. They might take for their own purposes his wagon, his mules, and that store of money, but his life was safe, yes, and Nanette's too. Of this she was so confident that people began to wonder whether she had not received some assurance to that effect, and when Pete, the stable boy driver, turned up at the end of the first week with the cock and bull story about having stolen an Indian pony and shot his way from the midst of the Sioux away up on No Wood Creek on the west side of the hills, and having ridden by night and hidden by day until he got back to the Platte and Frayne, people felt sure of it. Pete could talk Sioux better than he could jabber English. He declared the Indians were in the hills by thousands, and were going to take Hay and the young lady away off somewhere to be held for safe keeping. He said the 2 troops that, never even halting at Frayne, had pushed out on the trail, would only get into trouble if they tried to enter the hills from the south, and that they would never get the captives, wherein Pete was right, for away out among the spurs and gorges of the range, 50 miles from Frayne, the pursuers came upon the wreck of the wagon at the foot of an acclivity, up which a force of Sioux had gone in single file. Many warriors, it would seem, however, must have joined the party on the way, and from here, where, with the wagon, was found Hay's stout box, bereft of its contents. In 4 different directions the pony tracks of little parties crossed or climbed the spurs, and which way the captives had been taken, Captain Billings, the commander, could not determine. What the Sioux hoped he might do was divide his force into 4 detachments and send one on each trail. Then they could fall upon them, one by one, and slay them at their leisure. Billings saw the game, however, and was not to be caught. He knew Bill Hay, his past and his popularity among the red men. He knew that if they meant to kill him at all, they would not have taken the trouble to cart him 50 miles beforehand. He dropped the stern chase then and there, and on the following day skirted the foothills away to the east, and circling around to the breaks of the Powder as he reached the open country, struck and hard hit a scouting band of Sioux, and joined the general 3 days later when most he was needed, near the log palisades of old Fort Beecher. Then there had been more or less of mysterious coming and going among the half breed hangers on about the trader's store, and these were things the new post commander knew not how to interpret, even when informed of them. He saw Mrs. Hay but once or twice. He moved into the quarters of Major Webb, possessing himself until his own should arrive of such of the major's belongings as the vigilance of Mistress McGann would suffer. He stationed big guards from his two small companies about the post, and started more hard swearing among his own men for getting only 2 nights in bed than had been heard at Frayne in long months of less pious post commandership. He strove to make himself agreeable to the ladies, left lamenting for their lords, but as luck would have it, fell foremost into the clutches of the quartermaster's wife, the dominant and unterrified Wilkins. Just what prompted that energetic and in many ways estimable woman to take the new major into close communion and tell him not only what she knew, but what she thought, about all manner of matters at the post, can never be justly determined. But within the first few days of his coming, and on the eve of the arrival of General Field, Major Flint was in possession of the story of how devoted young Field had been to Esther Dade, and how cruelly he had jilted her for the brilliant Miss Flower, her that was gone with the Sioux. The differences between her stout veteran liege and the smooth-faced stripling had given her text to start with. The story of the money lost had filtered from her lips, and finally that of the other peccadilloes, attributable to the young post adjutant, whom, as she said, the Major had to reduce and send to the front all long of his doin's in garrison. Dade was gone. There was no man save Wilkins to whom Major Flint felt he could appeal for confirmation or denial of these stories. Dr. Waller was his senior in the service by 10 years at least, and a type of the old-time officer and gentleman of whom such as Flint stood ever in awe. He preferred, therefore, as he thought, to keep the doctor at a distance, to make him feel the immensity of his, the post commander's, station, and so, as Wilkins dare not disavow the sayings of his wife, even had he been so minded, the story stood. Flint was thinking of them this very evening when Dr. Waller, happening to meet him on his way from hospital, briefly said that General Field should be with them on the morrow. He leaves Rock Creek tonight, having hired transportation there. I had hoped our lad might be in better spirits by this time. The major answered vaguely. How could a lad with all these sins upon his soul be in anything but low spirits? Here was a brand to be snatched from the burning, a youth whom prompt, stern measures might redeem and restore, one who should be taught the error of his ways forthwith. Only the coming of the member of the military committee of the House of Representatives might make the process embarrassing. There were other ways, therefore and however, in which this valuable information in the major's possession might be put to use, and of these was the major thinking, more than of the condition of the wounded lad, physical or spiritual, as homeward through the gloaming he wended his way. Might it not be well to wait until this important and influential personage had reached the post before proceeding further? Might it not be well, confidentially and gradually, as it were, to permit the Honorable M.C. to know that grave irregularities had occurred, that up to this moment the complete knowledge thereof was locked in the breast of the present post commander, that the suppression or presentation of the facts depended solely upon that post commander, And then, if the member of the House Committee on Military Affairs